4-4, this is 7, stand by a minute. Just come on, what is your attack angle?
Okay, talk to him, see what that did.
Charlie Horse, 88.
24, traffic 275.
85 just made a pass in there. Can you give us any?
Go to 2-1, 77.
Roger, sir. Be advised we have Jolly Green 2-1 and 6-6 standing by over
Okay, I'll put it a little closer than those trees. Let me come around with a Lao 3 and I'll put it on those trees, sir.
Roger that, Lao 3.
Anything else that you would like to speak about?
Yeah, I've got one more story for you that I
Sure.
said a little bit at breakfast, and that was when we were working with the CIA in Laos, you never knew what to expect, but you knew to just relax and go do it. And it usually wasn't stuff that was really, really dangerous, but it was stuff where you knew you were in on something that nobody else knew about, and when you went back to the base, it wasn't something you were going to do a lot of talking about. So we get the daily schedule from 7th Air Force in Saigon, the so-called FRAG, and it had a line, and it said 10 o'clock in the morning, Hobo 4-4 flight of 2, with this ordnance and this fuel load, and take off and rendezvous to this point on the Luang Prabang Takan, which was the old royal capital of Laos, up in, if this is Laos, it's way up in the north central part. It said rendezvous on this frequency. Okay, so I take off with young First Lieutenant Lance Smith on my wing, later 4-star General Lance Smith, somebody that I knew would be very comfortable with whatever unusual things we were going to do, and we had no idea what we were going to do. So we fly up there, beautiful day, you can see for 100 miles, and we go over to the frequency, and I'm contacted by an Air America Platus Porter. The Porter is a short takeoff and landing, Swedish, I think, airplane that Air America flew a bunch of. And the guy says, Hobos, we're going to do a little bit of helicopter escort and a little bit of helicopter repair today. I said, okay. He says, just follow me and I'll tell you where we're going to rendezvous with the helicopters. And you knew when you did this that you didn't ask any questions. I mean, as long as what they said to you was something you could do and made sense, no questions got asked because they weren't going to answer them anyway, you know. And so we turn 90 degrees west. So we're in northern Laos headed west, and we've got about 100 miles of Laos. And I open my map up because I know exactly where we are, and I'm looking at the ground, and here's where we're flying along, flying west. And about 30 miles or 40 miles into this straight western flight, this little Air America Huey helicopter comes up, and they're all silver, no insignia on them or anything, just a tail number, comes up, and we start escorting him. And for us to escort him, we've got to weave like this, and we're flying along, and the Porter's flying at the same speed the helicopter is, so we're, you know, going over both of them. And I realize that on that page of my map, that when I get to the Laotian border, within 15 or 20 miles into Burma, I no longer have a map. It's the end of my map. And there's no sign of us slowing down as we're heading in that direction. And by this time, we lose the Luang Prabang Takan. So we don't have any navigation aid, and I don't have any idea. I know there are no Takan. Takan's a military name. There's none in Burma. You know, they're not our buddies. And so we're flying along, and I say to Lance Smith on our FM radio, where the CIA guys can't hear me, I say, this is going to be interesting. Let's keep track of where we are. My map ends here, and Lance said, my map ends there too. And I turned the map over, and on the back of the acetate covered map was just a white page. And I take my grease pencil and start drawing the terrain I see. So we fly 60 miles into Burma, and I know it's 60 miles because I start timing when I flew across the border, which I could tell, I could tell where we were by looking out. We fly 60 miles into Burma, and the Porter says, our destination is right ahead at 1 o'clock on the top of that ridgeline. And here's one of these classic Special Forces hard sites with the perimeters around it way up on the ridge and a fairly good-sized dirt helipad, cleared obviously by a bulldozer. And there's a Huey sitting there. And so our Huey goes in and lands right beside the other Huey. And the CIA guy says, I'm going to get far outside of you guys' circle and just circle. You watch, and if these guys start taking any fire, we will give you directions as to mortar or RPGs or whatever, and you're cleared to shoot back at anything on any side, that there's no friendlies, around this thing. And so we're watching this helicopter, and these guys take out one of these little tripod winches, and they swing a Huey engine, which is about out of the helicopter we were escorting, and start opening it. They're replacing the engine on this Huey. So we're up there circling for 2 hours.
The second Huey that's on the ground.
Yeah.
Is that an Air America Huey as well? Okay,
Yeah,
so
they're both Air America Hueys,
All right.
and the second one is bringing a replacement engine for the first one. So we're watching this, and I knew that good Huey guys could change an engine in an hour and 10 minutes or something like that. It wasn't a long time. So we're watching, and pretty soon they put the old engine back in the second Huey, and all of a sudden the broken helicopter's rotors start turning. So they're starting up the replacement engine, and they get running, and you see the guy do a classic hover check where he just went up 6 feet and sat there and turned one way and turned the other way and went back down. Then you see people come out from inside the buildings and get in the two helicopters, and they're putting fuel in the one that we were escorting because he'd used some up, so they're pumping it by hand in a
And
50.
he's still running, so they're doing hot fueling.
Well, no, he's not. He's shut down.
It's shut down,
The one they fixed is running, but he was already full of gas.
Okay.
So we take off. We escort the two of them straight back where we came. And meanwhile, I have drawn a very good map, because I pride myself on being a decent artist, of the terrain, and I've got a circle around, where we were. And again, going back outbound, we time it trying to figure out exactly how far in we were. And my two numbers matched within a half a mile, so you knew where you were. So we get back into the middle of Laos, and the guy says, thank you, and the Hueys go off, and you're released. So we went, found a Raven, did a normal strike mission, went back to NKP, and when we went into the Intel Center to debrief in the command post, one of my young lieutenant women intel officers comes in to debrief us, and I said, Sherry, don't take this the wrong way, but we just had an unusual mission, and I need you to go get your boss, and he's the one that needs to debrief us. And she says, oh, okay, and then goes off. Here comes the lieutenant colonel, so she leaves. We close the door, and I said, Lance, show the intel chief where we were. And I had written down, looking at the map, the military 8-digit coordinates of where I thought we were. Lance goes up and puts a grease circle around the exact same spot that I have in 60 miles into Burma. And this guy looks at us and says, what? And so we tell him the story, and we said, we're going to fill out this mission debrief about the strike mission on the Plain of Jars with the Ravens in support of General Vang Pao's troops, and we're not going to say anything about the rest of it. And he said, I understand, that's fine. I said, we just wanted to be sure we were doing this right, and that was the end of it. But to this day, Lance Smith and I think we're the only two A-1 pilots that ever flew a combat mission in Burma.
Holy cow. And I mean, that's just another one of those moments in the war where just something crazy happens.
And 40 years later, with Tim Castle, who wrote One Day Too Long, when Nancy and I lived in McLean, I was on an advisory panel at CIA 5 miles down the road, and Tim Castle was one of the CIA historians. And so I would stop by and visit Tim when I would go into the building. You know, getting in the building is a big deal, but once you're inside, you know, I'd go visit with Tim, and I said, here's what happened, here's where we were, and I could still remember it on the map. What's the explanation? And he said, well, it's probably written down someplace in the history, but the agency had relationships with a lot of those tribal chieftains, particularly in eastern Burma, who were very independent, who were very anti-communist, so we liked them. They had no loyalty to the main government in Rangoon, but they controlled their territory, and it was probably us doing a required social visit to one of those guys with some of our senior people, and the helicopter broke. And they needed to get the helicopter fixed, but they were worried that they'd drawn attention from the communist Burmese insurgents and didn't want to have a problem with either the people or the two helicopters. So that's why you guys were there, and obviously you didn't, your presence alone, you know, which it usually did, caused the bad guys to say, no, this is not a day we're gonna shoot at the helicopters. So that was what the reasonably explanation was.
Wow.
Take one.